Hey, how you doing? Okay, so today I want to take a step back and I want us to look at the 50,000-foot view of why we need to understand all of this gobbledygook science and this process of understanding how our emotions come to be and how our pain and suffering comes to be and why it occurs and how we can take control of it. I want to understand and take a 50,000-foot view on why we need to know all this stuff. Hey, welcome to the I Am Podcast, where we answer all the questions about spirituality and inner peace that you ever wanted to ask. I'm your host, Sean Webb. Okay, so first I'm wearing my Georgia Tech hat today. So shout out to all my peeps and my PhDs at Georgia Tech, at the Advanced Algorithm Center down there, and to the emotions folks and psychology folks who have helped us along our way. Appreciate you guys. Next, I wanted to put out some thank yous to the folks who've made contributions via the website, iamspirituality.com. Thank you to Tonda. Thank you to Jesse. And a big, huge thank you and a big old kiss to Roberta, who sent us in a sponsorship for the show today. And she sent along a note. I sent you the money because I realized how much I appreciate your podcasts. You have helped me a great deal in understanding my own emotional states, and also coming to understand why other people act the way they do, which is important because we're going to talk about compassion today and how to use this stuff to create compassion. As I listen to your presentations over and over again, I find myself suddenly seeing the answer to puzzling situations in my past relationships, with the explanations making sense in the light of the equation of emotion that you explained in the Body, Mind, Spirit 101 course and in your other material. I feel like I'm becoming steadily more clear and calm in my mind and heart. And that is what this show is all about. That little note makes my day. Thank you so much, Roberta, for your contribution, for your note, for the fact that this stuff is helping you, because that just is awesome for me. It's my large hope that all of this stuff that we're doing here in this podcast is going to help you decrease your levels of stress, decrease your pain and suffering, increase your levels of inner peace, because you, believe it or not, are step one to world peace. And here's how that works. You get to understand this cutting edge science and this explanation of how our pain and suffering works. You get to implement it in your own lives. You get to spread this to other people. And then eventually, when we start to teach this discipline, this understanding, this process to tomorrow's leaders, if they start to understand in the future that they don't have to start firing missiles at each other to kill people who think differently, then we're talking about being that much closer to world peace. So you are the first step in that process. Gandhi said, world peace can only be attained through inner peace, and there is nothing that's been said that is more truer than that one statement regarding our process of getting to world peace. It's going to be through the spread of inner peace, one by one by one by one. So every person that you share this with, we are going to be that much closer to world peace, because we've talked about the science and neuroscience of how this is solid stuff. This is the way our pain and suffering works. This is the way our stress works. This is the way our motivation for conflict works. And so when we get that process out into the world and people start understanding and being able to manipulate it and be in control of it rather than be controlled by it, then we're talking about world peace, baby. Okay, so let's get into today's topic. And today's topic is why? Why do we need to look at all the stuff that we're looking at and control our pain and suffering and get to understand the mechanisms of our mind and how it works and understand where our stress comes from and how to reduce it and how to increase our levels of inner peace? Why do we need to know all this stuff? Why do we need to go through all this big process and understand all these, like, the equation and attachments and yada, yada, yada? Why do we need to know all that stuff? Well, first, it comes down to some of the most ancient messages that have been instilled into the foundations of spiritual message and religions in general. It was a inscription at the oracle at Delphi, and the two words on the top of the entrance says, "Know thyself." And know thyself is one of the most profound ancient messages in all of humanity. Because if you understand, there are two meanings. It's a double meaning for know thyself. First, if you understand the process of your pain and suffering, and you understand the process that creates your negative emotions, you can start to break that process. If you know the variables that go into that process, you can start to break that process and remove the pain and suffering, remove the negative emotions, remove the negativity from your life, which is super important in leading a happy and fulfilled life. Wouldn't you agree? So the one side of the know thyself coin is to understand how your brain works subconsciously, how you work as a human being. And that's what this podcast is all about, is to get us from point A to point B. Now, point B is the other side of the coin. The know thyself message on the other side of the coin is that all of this is simply a machination of our mind. It is an invention within our brain that creates the illusions of our pain and suffering. And the reality of our existence is a more profound, deeper, spiritual existence that can only be felt to be understood. It can be only experienced to be comprehended. And this is where meditation comes in. This is where, all the different types of meditation. This is where the other disciplines come in. Anything that can get your mind into shutting down. Anything that can get your mind into quietude, of removing these things from your consciousness, removing the equation of emotion, removing your attachments, putting those out of your mind. All of a sudden your mind is silent. At that point, then you experience the spiritual existence that exists underneath all that. You hear what can be heard just beyond all of this noise of your brain, all of this noise that is being created by your mindful machinations. Because there is an expansion of consciousness that does exist, that does come into being when you shut your mind noise down. It is an experience that comes into your consciousness that you didn't even know existed, that you couldn't even fathom could exist when you shut this noise down. Okay, so the first reason we need to know all this stuff, those two steps. And it goes back to the know thyself inscription. If you're not a big fan of the Oracle of Delphi, Jesus said it this way in the Gospel of Thomas: those who know themselves, the world is not worthy. Muhammad: he who knows himself knows God. How profound is that? So when we're talking about all this science, we're talking about all, the equation of emotion and the attachments that create your expectations and preferences in life and your perceptions as they come into being, and then creating your emotions, yada, yada, yada. And when we're looking at that minutia, we're all on the path of the know thyself message. That's the type of deep meaning that we're talking about going into this teaching, going into these lessons. Now, if that weren't good enough, and frankly, it should be, the opportunity for this path to lead you to the deep, dark secrets that underlie all of the world's religions and spirituality in general, yeah, that should be enough to keep us on this path. If that weren't enough, there are other reasons that we would want to understand the basis for all of this model, all of this science, all of this understanding about where our pain and suffering comes from and how to mitigate it, because we can also improve our regular lives. I mean, before the fact that we have this spiritual awakening or this metamorphosis that allows us to become closer to Buddha, Jesus, Muhammad, Krishna, Gandhi, all of the historical religious figures throughout history, we can use this from a practical perspective to increase and improve the happiness in our lives. Because when you start to understand that yourself is basically made up of this cognitive attachment map, and different attachments become portions of your sense of self, and then when you understand your functioning of your brain is basically there to help us survive an extra day, and it's there, and the emotions and the processing, the subconscious processing within the mind is there to help us survive and defend self, right? Because when a bear walks out of the woods in front of us, we have that fear, fight or flight response. That is a beneficial emotional response to what could be a danger to us, a threat to us. Well, a threat to self. And at the point you start to understand that extra stuff gets attached to this self, and that your favorite football team, or your stance on pro-life, pro-choice, or the fact that you want your kids to do a certain thing and they're doing something else, when you start to understand that these attachments of mind come into your sense of self, and then that feeds into the automated circuitry that is designed to help prolong ourself, and that our emotional responses are a result of the world interacting with the things that we see as self, all of a sudden you can start to play with the variables. All of a sudden you can start to take control of your emotional life by saying, okay, these attachments that I have create the expectations and or preferences that I have in my mind subconsciously. Because again, remember, this is a subconscious process. This is a defensive self mechanism. And so when you have your favorite football team and it's an attachment on your attachment map, it creates an automated expectation and or preference that portion of yourself remains status quo or increase in value, because that's what we're all about. That's what all emotions are all about, is that when a bear walks out of the woods, the emotions are designed to help us remain ourself, status quo, or increase in value. And so anytime that the world presents a perception to us that our self may be devalued a little bit, then our negative emotions help us to prepare, to defend, or to prolong our life. And so these expectations or preferences are generated subconsciously, but that doesn't mean you can't play with them. That doesn't mean you can't consciously adjust them. And what does that do? That changes your whole emotional outlook. Additionally, your perception. When you start playing with this perception variable in the equation of emotion through whatever means, cognitive behavioral therapy, neuro-linguistic programming, you have all of these scientific disciplines that are designed to basically to change your perception. When you start playing with perception, it starts playing with your emotional outlook. It starts playing with the unconscious circuitry that helps you create the emotional environment that you exist within every day. So if you start playing with these variables, you start to gain control of your emotional landscape. And you start to be able to mold your well-being into existence consciously by controlling the unconscious process, by controlling the variables that go into that unconscious process. So that's reason number two. If reason number one wasn't good enough, that it leads us to spiritual enlightenment and all the secrets of the universe and all the things that the wise masters of the past spoke about, if it's not important enough for you to be able to get to that place that they exist within, and so that you can exist without pain and suffering, without stress, and just walk around in total bliss, if that's not your bag, how about just reducing your pain and suffering through scientific manipulation of the variables that cause your pain and suffering? So what if that's not enough? Well, let's talk about reason number three. Okay, so let's say you're not practiced enough to be able to play with the variables, play with your expectation or preference about things. Let's say you just have these attachments and you want things to go a certain way and yada, 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 and you have your perceptions and you're very ingrained and that's just the way you are. Bullshit. But let's say you're at that step. Well, another reason that we'd want to understand this whole process of attachments of self and how they play into the equation of emotion is simply being able to witness the emotions as they rise in our psyche, because a study in 2007 from UCLA proves that when we start to identify and name our emotions, a big thick curtain comes down in between us and our emotions, and we're less affected by the emotional response. They showed in fMRI that the amygdala actually shuts down much quicker when you are consciously acknowledging and naming your emotions than if you don't do that process. So let's say you've got an instance of anger, fear, sadness, or one of the emotions in one of those families that is arising in you. If you can see the process as it's happening, you can see your attachment, or you can see your expectation or preference as compared to your perception. And those are the two simple questions that you need to ask yourself after you have every emotion, because you will find that every emotion is governed by this equation of emotion. What was my expectation or preference? Or what is my expectation or preference that's being attacked or being devalued or being brought into danger at this point? What is the perception that's causing this? At the point that you can see that process occurring live, immediately, your negative emotions are controlling you less. You are now in control of the situation versus the situation being in control of you. So, understanding this basic process and witnessing this basic process in motion as things come up to create havoc in your life, if you can simply acknowledge what's going on, you're less affected by what's going on. And how is that cool? Well, because, remember, stress is caused by any imbalance in the equation of emotion over time, right? I mean, if you think about it, if you have an anger situation for a few seconds, you are going to experience stress over those few seconds until it goes away, until you're over it. If you have a chronic anger situation, like we talked about in last episode, you're going to have chronic stress over that time. Well, stress releases stress hormones, which kills your cognitive ability. It actually kills neurons. It kills brain cells. It increases your heart rate. It increases your blood pressure. It increases the potential that you're going to turn on your cancer genes. These types of things kill you. So at the very least, when you're talking about witnessing and reducing the effect of your negative emotions, you're talking about increasing your health and prolonging your life. So that would be reason number 3 to understand this whole process. Let's talk about reason number 4. Reason number 4 is connected with our entire path of learning about ourselves, the Know Thyself path, learning about our spirituality, discovering our spirituality, learning about our emotions, learning about our pain and suffering, reducing our pain and suffering, and reducing the effect of our subconscious processing of the brain, right? And that has to do with plasticity. Now, if you don't understand plasticity, it's this simple. When you go to the gym and you work out and you pump your muscles get bigger. Same thing happens in your brain. Your gray matter will physically change depending on how you use your brain. And this is proven over hundreds of studies at this point, where in as little as 8 weeks or as little as 100 hours of an activity will start to physically change your brain. When you work certain areas of your brain more, they will get stronger. And when you work certain areas of your brain less, they will get weaker. And as you work your negative emotion areas of your brain less, by increasing your level peace and your regulation, your emotional regulation centers of your brain more, your emotional regulation centers will get pumped up like Arnold, and your bad juju, negative emotion, pain, and suffering centers will shrink. And that becomes a pattern that then makes it easier for you to live an awesome, very cool, happy Zen life without even trying. Because as you practice these disciplines, as you practice these methods, as you practice this mindfulness, you are going to get stronger in those areas of your brain. And due to that change, it will then become easier and more of a habit for you to be able to exist in a lower stress environment, in a lower pain and suffering environment. And you'll be able to identify, and it'll become easy, it'll become automatic. You'll be able to see this process. You'll be able to see your equation of emotion playing out in every situation that you come into that is vexing you or starting to ruin your day. You'll be able to see it, you'll be able to step away from it, and it'll become that much easier because of the plasticity that allows it to become a habit. And at the point that you have it down cold, just like Michael Jordan in his day when he was closing his eyes to make his free throw shots, you will be unconsciously quelling anger, quelling sadness, quelling fear, or any of the family of emotions that are surrounding those. You'll be quelling those subconsciously without even thinking about it. And you'll be walking through life, whistling, smelling the flowers, noticing all the cool things, and all the bad stuff will be rolling off your back. And that is reason 4. Let's talk about reason 5. Reason 5 has to do with improving the world and how you are going to improve the world simply by improving you. You don't have to go out and do anything. I'm not asking you to go out and do a darn thing. Don't go out and proselytize this unless you really think that it's going to help someone. I mean, don't get me wrong. I would love if you make referrals to folks who may want to understand their pain and suffering better or may want to take better control of their lives. Awesome. Send them, because one by one, we're going to increase the levels of world peace through increasing the levels of inner peace. Go do that. But at the same time, simply by increasing your level of emotional intelligence, you can increase the quality of the people's lives around you by fostering compassion within you. How do you foster compassion within you? It's this simple. Compassion is understanding and being able to identify other people's pain, other people's suffering, and being able to help alleviate that through your existence. So, at the point that you understand everyone in the world, all of their pain and suffering comes from this equation of emotion, because this is how biology works. Expectation and/or preference as compared to perception is how the entire brain works, according to David Eagleman, and he has a lot of science behind it to back it up. And you understand the attachment map, and that cognitive attachments are what make people individuals, and certain attachments, all attachments, then create expectations or preferences that fill the half of the equation of emotion. You can start to map the people that you meet in your head, visualizing what their attachments are, visualizing what their expectations or preferences are, visualizing what their preferences, or what their perceptions are. You can start to understand their pain and suffering to a point that better than they do. And you can start to understand what things you might be able to say or what aid you might be able to give them to release and reduce the pressure caused by their subconscious processing of the brain. You can then identify the things that need to come into play to help them, or maybe give them different perceptions. Maybe help them look at things a little differently. Because at the point that you understand exactly what it is, exactly the variables that is causing their strife, and you can start to play with the variables by maybe helping them change their expectation or preference, or helping them change their perception. Now you're playing the role of a saint. Now you're in there helping them change their very emotional landscape. And that's what compassion is all about. Compassion is a true understanding of what creates someone's pain and suffering, and a true understanding on how to help them get through that, get out of it, relieve that negative tension, etc. And so, again, if you want to send them this way to the Body, Mind, Spirit 101, awesome. Great. You know it's free. So do so. Share this stuff. But also, the reason that you want to know it is because when you're not near an iPhone or an iPad or a computer or some other thing that can allow you to say, hey, watch this video about the situation that you're dealing with. You can help them understand the entire reason of their anger, sadness, worry, regret, fear, whatever it is, or the number of emotions that are grouped into those subgroups. You can help them get through that and totally understand. You're not going to be groping in the dark for what it is that has caused them ill will or bad emotions. You're going to know exactly. You're going to see it because you're going to understand the process that much better. And so fostering compassion is another huge reason that we want to understand this whole science, this whole model, this whole way that we work. Because if you can understand people and understand where their pain and suffering comes from, you can help them alleviate that pain and suffering. And then we're all that much closer to world peace. So let's go to the wrap-up. Guys, this is the bleeding edge of understanding self, understanding emotion science, understanding pain and suffering, understanding the path to inner peace, understanding the path to mindfulness. This model, it's officially still a theory until the majority of the scientific community accepts it. But at the same time, it's the best thing that we have right now to explain the reasons for our pain and suffering and the reasons for the creation of the emotions that we have, including all of our negative emotions that we can now adjust and take control of rather than be controlled by them. But it's a long path. It is a path of practice. It is a path of understanding. It is a path of implementation. And it's a path of constant study, both of yourself and of the science that comes out to help us better understand ourselves and other people and the commonalities, and so that we can create a more peaceful world, ultimately, through creating a more peaceful inner existence. I thank you for taking this journey with me, because through taking this journey and sharing this journey, that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to raise levels of inner peace, and we're going to raise levels of world peace. So send this for selfish reasons. Send this to folks who want to increase their happiness, who want to decrease their stress, who want to increase their levels of health, right? Because remember, meditation, the two groups of people, one group was told to meditate, the other group was told to exercise and diet. And the meditators, 66% less stroke and heart attack over a 10-year period than the folks who are eating right and exercising. Yeah! Let's hear it for chocolate. As long as you're meditating. So send this for selfish reasons. Send this to folks to say, this is, a path to being able to take control of my negative emotions, to totally change my emotional landscape, to be able to understand how to increase my levels of happiness, decrease my levels of stress, increase my levels of inner peace. And then as a side effect, we will then be pushing the world towards world peace, because at the point that we're teaching this stuff to kids in 100 years, ooh, yeah, the military-industrial complex will be no mo. Love you guys. Hope you're having a great week. Next week, we're going to talk about an email that I got that asks how they can manage their anger, because they seem to be angry at everything and flying off the handle, and all these things make them angry, and they're yelling at other drivers and yada, yada, yada. We're going to read that email. We're going to dig into it. Don't miss next week. I love you guys. Talk to you soon. Peace.